Hey everybody, Norm from Tested here, and we're in the home of Frank Ippolito. Frank, how you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah, well, this is an amazing suit you have here that you and your team at Thingergy made for the latest season of
Stranger Things.
Oh my God, that's so cool.
Yeah, I was super excited when the costume designer Amy Paris called me. Like, I love the show, it's so awesome, and to get to build a containment suit for it is like, it's kind of iconic.
Well, that's what this is. Right? This is a biohazard containment suit. Seen in the third season, it's the Russian take on it. And not only did your team do all the fabrication for this, but you had some design as well?
Yeah, Amy, I worked with Amy on a couple of shows before, and she trusted me to kind of do some sketches and designs. And gave her a bunch of things. She kind of honed us down into a very specific look, and she liked it. So we kind of moved on with that.
And it's on the show, it's on screen. Well, we're here in Frank's shop today to learn about the design and fabrication of a specialty costume like this. This isn't something you can just go and shop around and buy something off the shelf that looks anywhere near this.
There's a couple of vintage parts that we found like in surplus places, but just about everything is made custom order.
All right, so let's go to where it all begins, which is the design.
Yes.
So let's talk about sketches. These are your drawings.
These are my drawings, just regular pen and ink and marker drawings. Amy gave me a whole bunch of reference for things that she liked. And so I started putting elements of that stuff together. And we also were trying to pull from like high altitude pressure suits and things that were already kind of established in that era. And then just kind of give it a little bit of a flair for, you know, make it fun.
I mean, when you're talking about containment suit, and that's like kind of the brief, right?
Yeah.
It needs to be full coverage.
Yeah.
You're going to have some type of visor or mask. You need to, and then you
They
have
wanted
hard
some armor
parts
on it. They wanted like things like knee pads and belts and stuff like that. So we just tried to make it a little bit more tactical-ish. You know, you're fighting a monster in the Upside Down.
That's right.
You know, who knows what you're going to run into.
And then, but that also gives you a lot of freedom for you to design things like the silhouette of the shoulders, or just where the seam lines are,
Yes.
and a mix of like the different types of textures. Because even looking at this, which is very close to what you guys ended up building, you could tell, okay, it's going to be darker down the center, or different color, and it's not just going to be one flight suit type fabric.
Yeah. Yeah, you want to give the eye somewhere to like rest in detail versus just cramming all kinds of like busy stuff into it. So I wanted to, you know, have a little bit of a balance in that.
How many sketches did you end up doing, and how different were they?
I did about 10 different sketches, and some of it was just, you know, just detail parts for like the backpack. We did a bunch of different designs for the hoods, you know, details for the arms that were, you know, a little bit more like those flight suits, and then, you know, a couple different takes on what the suit may be, you know, whether that torso part is metal or whether it's, you know, plastic, or, you know, what are we using?
And the whole time when you're working on this, are you constantly thinking about fabrication in your head? Like, as I draw this,
how am I going to build it?
How are you going to build it? Because you got to do both.
It's really tricky because there's a lot of times you get drawings from, you know, costume designers. You know, how the hell am I going to build this?
Right.
So I kind of have it in the back of my mind, but you sort of need to turn that off at some point and just design what you feel or what looks good or what's cool or what fits the character. So it's trying to balance that.
Okay, so once there's a design that's signed off on and approved, then you got to start thinking about how to put it together.
Yes.
And let's talk about then the fabrics, the cut and sew.
Yeah.
You have a team here of seamstresses that put together
Yeah.
the fabric and put together the suits. What do you give them?
So the first thing you want to do is you want to make what's called a flat. And so it's basically just taking those patterns and you like squish it down and kind of give them the information for how to start generating their patterns once they start draping on the body forms. You know, a lot of really good pattern makers can just, you know, look at a flat and they can start cutting parts.
And this isn't for fitting, right? This is not the same as measurements that you would have later in the process for fitting a specific actor. This is purely the layout of where the fabric is, where the seams are, what might be piping, and how it looks before you start actually sewing.
Yeah, it's another way to translate information to the people that are going to start patterning. And then because this is for stunt performers, we kind of made them all like one size fits most-ish, which is a tricky thing to do, but you build it for a stuntman kind of, you know, size, and then give enough seam allowance so that they could be altered a little bit, when they do get them there, if they have to take it in a bunch. A lot of it is making sure to give the team on set room to make alterations.
Okay, so you're happy with the design, you start looking for materials.
Yeah.
Then. Where do you find fabric?
It took a couple days of us hunting around downtown LA for fabric. There's a huge fashion district, there's tons of fabric. We went and we pulled tons and tons of swatches and sent those to Amy, and we ended up settling on Cordura for most of the fabric. The boot spats were kind of a tactical, like kind of rubberized fabric. And then we ended up having to dye all of this stuff too.
So it's not, you're buying rolls of this stuff,
Yeah.
and you're looking for how it folds, how stiff it is,
texture.
the texture, what it looks like when light bounces off of this, but then this is all custom dyed.
Yes.
Like you're not buying it in this color.
Well, yeah, they didn't have it quite what we wanted. We wanted
Yeah.
it a deeper red, so we did that. And then the teal colors on there, we did about 3 or 4 different dye tests just to try and get it close to that.
And that's not easy, right? Because
No.
you can have something in Photoshop, you can have something with your marker, you can have your perfect balance of colors, but dyeing is its own art.
Yeah, and colors on a hard surface versus fabric, they reflect differently, light's different. Like it's
Right.
always really, really hard. And the thing that I'm learning about tealish colors is that some people see more green, some people see more blue, and then they'll adjust that according to what they think that they see. So we might both be looking at the exact same color, and you'll say, "Oh, that's green," and I'll say, "No, it's teal."
Right.
And I'll say it's more blue.
Of course, and it's reacting to what light it's going to be filmed in,
Yeah.
whether it's tungsten or
Oh, yeah.
it's like daylight, you don't know.
And just your own personal bias as to what a color actually is.
Yeah, that sounds like a big part of the process. Yeah, that's why there's so many samples here.
Yes.
Of just different fabrics.
But that's what developing a costume like this is. It's about finding those colors and finding which one works together, and how all of those textures and colors just really work.
yeah, we hear like costume designers, they just have like a big like encyclopedic knowledge in their head of colors, of textiles. They're always going shopping,
Yeah.
building inventories of like, okay, I know that's a cool fabric, I could use it for that project.
Yeah.
Or when I have this new design, I really want to use this fabric. You have samples here that, to my eye, look like, okay, that's very similar fabric.
This one is the Cordura. This one's a cotton.
But they're very different, and they
Yeah.
wear differently.
They
bunch up differently. Like when someone's gonna be moving in it,
Yeah.
it's totally different. I picked the right one.
And this is all still a learning process for us too. Like every single job we do, we learn a brand new thing moving into the next job. So this was also great to kind of figure out some of these fabric things.
Now the hard parts, and some of the hard parts actually pseudo hard parts because they're foam. They did some foam fabrication.
Yeah, a lot of times with costumes, we'll start fabricating shapes out of foam or out of clay or whatever, just because it's quick to do design iterations. Gary banged out a couple of these things like super, super quick, and we were able to mock up, lens shapes and all these things to get kind of notes and approvals before we went into 3D.
And then from this, you also have like your big armored
the big torso
chest piece,
piece.
torso piece.
Yeah, same thing with that. We sculpted this piece. Not that it's a complicated part to model, but just to kind of get, the distance in, where your armpit is. And like some of these shapes are a little, they kind of influence how things are going to move. So I just wanted to kind of play around with those shapes in clay first. And so Nora ended up sculpting half of this thing in clay, and I would give her little notes on like, oh, move this line this way and move this way. And then we 3D scanned it, and then we were able to, mirror that and model it in the computer and print it.
And you take an extra step, going back to the physical, because that allows you to make adjustments on the fly, right? And then you can then print out and cast your versions. What material is this?
These are all cast in a urethane, and then they're reinforced with some fiberglass to give them a little bit of strength and stiffness. Because these things are all going on Stuntman, we wanted it to look like hard plastic, but everything is flexible, and everything can take an impact, and everything's kind of durable.
And then the whole thing again is kind of accented with interesting piping, whether for the gloves or this. I love that piping you have on the top, that braided leather almost look.
Yeah, that's texture.
Yeah, exactly. And then with things like lights, tubing, belts, some of the stuff you can find off the shelf just to make it look like it's a real piece of Russian clothing.
Yeah.
And then you got some functionality, the backpack.
Yeah, so the backpack we designed, we did a bunch of different versions of that, and when we would do these mock-ups, we'd start them in muslin, and then we would figure out some of the shapes, and then we'd build the inner structure in foam, And then Gary added some fans into it, so the fans actually pump the air into the helmet to help a little bit with cooling. And so yeah, it's a functional backpack.
So cool. And it's something that for a show like this, they're not hero characters, but they are part of that world building. They're where if viewers catch a glance, they immediately can read, one, it's Russian, and two, that's some type of containment. They know that reads like, those people in there are, something's going on, that's why you need to wear that suit.
Yeah.
And there's a whole history there.
Yeah, well that whole show is so like wall to wall packed with like very detailed things all over in the background. Amy did a really good job of like really packing the mall with all that density of like 80s pop culture and reference and stuff like that. And the same thing with this thing, like it just fills out that world.
Oh, I mean, how fun it must have been for you and your team to be part of that world building process. And when I saw it on screen, I'm like, oh, I know the guy who made that. That's so cool. Thank you so much, Frank, for sharing with us this design process, and hopefully get to work on a lot more of these things in the future.
Hell yeah.